And for more, let's now bring in Sourabh Gupta for his insight on the trilateral talks. He's a senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. First time these countries are coming together for a joint summit in about 4 years. Why was the time ripe now, and how productive was it, do you think?
Part of the problem with the trilateral summit and the delays in having these meetings is because there are historical issues between some of these countries, and there had been between Korea and Japan. There was quite a lot of negative feeling between them until 2022. Of course, from 2020 onwards, we also had COVID strike, and therefore the timing was just not facilitative to have a summit meeting until very recently, frankly. The leaders' summits have been happening since 2008, and yet there have been including this one, just 9 summit meetings. And till the countries can all get beyond their history and can come on the same page, I'm afraid we are going to see these sort of delays creeping in from time to time.
And sir, what are some of the key areas of mutual cooperation that emerged from this summit, and how quickly do we start to see any of the results? Some of the things discussed: climate, conservation, technology.
Yes, they had 6 focus areas on which they said they were going to emphasize their common activities. The most important area I would submit is in the area of economics and trade. The Trilateral Summit has essentially been a framework for deepening economic and trade cooperation, considering that the 3 countries are hugely interdependent on each other for trade in a lot of manufactured goods, and yet at the same time do not have a trilateral FTA, a free trade agreement. Most of these countries have a lot of economic partnership agreements and free trade agreements with a lot of other major players, but amongst themselves, they don't have that sort of free trade arrangement which could deepen their ties and create even greater prosperity. I think that is the fundamental area where they have focused on even at this summit, but they have also paid attention to other matters such as public health in the context of the pandemic that we've had, in terms of deepening science and technology cooperation, particularly in the area of climate change, and also in sort of disaster preparedness and relief. So it's wide-ranging, but they have stayed more or less away from the hot-button political issues, even though they were discussed and focused more on the economic and trade dimensions among the 3 countries.
And just staying on the economic aspect of this regionally, just how important is a free trade agreement, do you think? How impactful would it be?
I think it would be very, very impactful. Already the countries have very, very deep connections with each other, but the fact that they don't have that trade agreement just goes to show how much more further deeper that those connections could be. I would hope that that trade agreement would be a comprehensive one, spanning not just goods, but also services and investment commitments and competition policy, etc. And in this regard, I think it was heartening to see that at this very summit, they had a cooperation agreement among their patent offices. Remember, these are 3 countries which are hugely innovative and dynamic, both in terms of in advanced manufacturing as well as in the digital sector. And this requires strong intellectual property protections. And it's useful to see that the countries coming together on the same page, trying to deepen that cooperation in these frameworks. And therefore, the FTA must be not just a goods FTA, it needs to be a comprehensive one, including on issues like comprehensive policy and on industrial subsidies, etc.
And of course, the U.S. has been looking at this quite closely. How does the U.S. view this summit? Is it something that it should be wary about?
Yeah, the United States is watching this with wary eyes. There's no question about it. After all, the U.S. has tried to decouple many of the relations of Japan and South Korea that they have with China. The U.S. has done this both through its strategic trade controls as well as through its subsidies policies, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, where a lot of money has been provided as on tap for South Korean and Japanese companies to access the U.S. market, but on the condition that they decouple from the Chinese market. And this has left them facing a difficult dilemma, the Koreans and the Japanese, because at the end of the day, they know they need the Chinese market to create those revenues which they can plow back into R&D, which will allow them to compete. And so there it is. The U.S. has been watching to see whether the strategic trade controls that it has laid out are going to be violated or not by its allies and partner Japan and South Korea, and therefore it has been keeping a very watch on how the three countries once again come together to discuss economic cooperation.
Now we'll have to see how it all unfolds. We'll leave it there. Sourabh Gupta, thank you so much for your time, sir.
You're welcome.